back in the day when I was a kid, well, I don't know anything about STD. Well, I used to know that when you touch people with STD, you will be infected, even though the people touch you or sneeze at you. And this is what make me afraid of STD when I was a kid. I usually try to stay away from them, and I try not to have any contact with people that have STD. Well, this is the issue nowadays. The government want to make STD tests mandatory and the results should be publicized in the public register. Well, based on what I have experienced, I think it rather should be made optional than mandated because you know what? It will cause a backfire to the society if you try to make it mandatory. First, I would like to explain why I think it should be made optional. When you make STD optional, it can avoid marriage problem. First, STD carriers are too afraid to tell it to their family if they have STD. And if people have STD, it can destroy their marriage. They can cancel their wedding or they're being discriminated by the family members. You know what? In Malaysia itself, there's a lot of divorces happen because of their spouse has STD. If something's not relevant, you marry because you love them, not because you want to have an intercourse with them. And also, on the bright side, when you make it as an optional, you can build the sense of trust within your partner. If the partner volunteer to do it, you know right, you can sense the trust in your partner. And my second point is to combat stigmatization. First of all, we all know in our society, STD is something that a taboo words. When people have STD, everybody start to avoid them. They start to discriminate them. They start to um, doesn't want to talk to them and leave them alone, suffering. Well, this is very danger because it can lead someone to secretiveness and denial. They deny themselves. They don't want to exist in the world. They don't have anybody. And this will lead to risky sex behavior. Well, nobody knows they have STD and they tend to have sexual intercourse with random people, and this will make a major spread in the society. And what I can uh, elaborate more about this STD, about combating stigmatization, is because our society doesn't understand what is STD. People will isolate the carrier and cause more suffering, not only mental but also physical. And lastly, STD will create chaos in our society. Our status quo today, it is very bad for us to talk anything about sex. You know what? When our government tried to implement the sex education, look what happened. A lot of parents try to avoid their children to learn it because in our society we think that sex is a taboo. It's something that we should not learn, and this causes chaos to society because our society doesn't know what is STD, how it transmits, and how to prevent it. So, what happened in China? The STD create chaos in society because the patients, the carrier, doesn't want to seek doctor because they're afraid that the doctor will discriminate them. And a woman carrier is tend to be despised by the society. So much hatred, so much negative vibe around them. They have been pushed. They've been eradicated from the society like they doesn't exist. They don't important to the society. And uh, to explain furthermore about how STD will create chaos in society, like I said earlier, our society doesn't know about STD. They don't have any education. They don't know how what is STD, and the main problem is they don't know that STD can be treated. Yes, there is actually a treatment for STD and also HIV. Even though we don't have the cure, but we have the treatment to reduce the impact of the impact of the disease. So to summarize what I've all my point is STD should be made optional because we can avoid a lot of disruption in our society, because our status quo is not ready yet for this kind of mandatory policies. Because first, if we want to regulate this policy, we should educate them first. We should make them prepare mentally and physically before we can do this. STD test as a mandatory and publicize it to everybody. So by now, I think it's very wise for us to make it optional rather than mandate it. So with that, I end my presentation. Thank you for paying attention.